February 16th, 1944, above Truk Lagoon, Caroline Islands, 0457 hours. The first light of dawn had not yet broken when Lieutenant Commander James Hawk Ellison leaned over the edge of his SBD Dauntless cockpit and saw the dark shape of Truk Lagoon appear beneath the clouds, an enormous ring of islands encircling a sheltered bay so calm it looked like black glass. From the air, it resembled a volcano crater filled with water. But inside that crater lay something far more dangerous. Dozens of airfields, torpedo depots, repair docks, fuel farms, anchored cruisers and destroyers, a fleet yard so large and so well fortified that U.S. intelligence called it Japan's secret Pearl Harbor. For 2 years, it had served as the forward base for the Imperial Japanese Navy, the staging ground for operations across the Pacific. Untouchable, impregnable, a fortress in the middle of nowhere. Until today. "We're approaching initial point," Ellison crackled into his radio, voice low but steady. "All birds check in." One by one, the pilots of Task Force 58 responded. F-6F Hellcats, TBF Avengers, SB-2C Helldivers, each one a dark silhouette gliding silently through the pre-dawn cold. Far behind them, hidden by cloud cover, the carriers Enterprise, Yorktown, Essex, and Intrepid steamed steadily forward, their decks empty, their crews listening to the low rumble of engines fading into the distance. Operation Hailstone had begun. Below the clouds, the lagoon stirred with quiet activity. Japanese lookouts patrolled the docks, stamping their feet against the cold ocean wind. Mechanics wheeled torpedoes across damp wooden planks. A group of sailors loaded fuel drums onto a small barge, unaware of the American strike group descending through the fog above them. The Imperial Navy believed Truk was too far away, too heavily defended, too sacred to be attacked. Ellison and his squadron were about to prove them wrong. At 0504, the sun broke over the horizon, an orange line splitting the sky. It illuminated the entire lagoon in a surreal glow, revealing a vast collection of warships sleeping at anchor. Heavy cruisers Nagara and Katori, destroyers Oit and Shigura, cargo ships, tankers, even a seaplane tender. To the north, runways glinted under the fresh sunlight. To the south, a fuel depot rose like a cluster of steel skeletons. "Hawk, this is Falcon Lead, visual confirmed. Truk is wide awake." "Not for long," Ellison murmured. He lowered the nose and began the dive. The Dauntless shook violently as it knifed through the morning air, the wind screaming across its wings. The altimeter spun downward, 5,000 feet, 4,000, 3,000. Tracers erupted from the islands below, red-orange streaks clawing upward in long, angry arcs. The Japanese were awake now, and terrified. "Anti-aircraft heavy on the west side! Break left! Break left!" A Helldiver behind Ellison took a direct hit, its wings sheared off, spiraling into the lagoon in a burst of fire and water. Ellison gritted his teeth. He'd seen Pearl Harbor as a young pilot. He remembered the smoke, the screams, the twisted metal. Today felt like justice. At 2,000 feet, he saw his target, a heavily loaded transport ship, the Aikoku Maru, anchored near the northern wharf. Troops slept on deck, crates of munitions were stacked around its forward gun turret. Perfect. Ellison lined up the dive, crosshairs steady despite the flak bursting around him. Steady, steady. The ship's alarm bells clanged frantically. Sailors scattered across the deck. A gun crew struggled to swing their 25mm cannon upward, their hands shaking. "Now!" Ellison released his bomb. The Dauntless lurched upward from the sudden loss of weight. He pulled hard on the stick, feeling the G-forces crush him into his seat. A second later, whoomp! The explosion tore the Aikoku Maru open like a tin can. Flames shot 30 meters into the air. Shockwaves rippled across the lagoon. A fuel tank detonated, sending shrapnel raining across nearby ships. Columns of black smoke rose like volcanic ash. "Direct hit," Ellison shouted. Pull out, form on me." Across the lagoon, the sky became a storm of American aircraft diving in coordinated waves. Avengers torpedoed destroyers attempting to flee. Hellcats strafed runways and fuel dumps. Helldivers sank cargo ships one by one. The entire lagoon transformed into a boiling cauldron of fire, smoke, and twisted steel. From above, Ellison saw panic take over the Japanese defenses. A cruiser tried to get underway, but a torpedo struck its bow, setting the forward magazine ablaze. A line of Zeros scrambled from an airstrip, but were shot down before they cleared the runway. Anti-aircraft guns spat frantically at the sky, their tracers lost in the chaos. "Hawk, this is Drake 2. Fuel depot hit. Secondary explosions. You should see this fireball." "Keep pressure on their runways," Ellison replied. "We trap everything in the lagoon." Truk was becoming a death trap. Smoke blanketed the water. Ships collided blindly. Men jumped overboard as flames chased them across their decks. And still waves of American aircraft poured in. Ellison banked sharply to avoid a burst of flak and caught a glimpse of something he hadn't expected. An enormous shadow moving beneath the lagoon's surface. A ship, a big one. Sunken or hiding? Impossible to tell. For a moment, the water seemed to glow with reflected firelight, illuminating shapes far below. Aircraft, trucks, crates, all submerged long before the raid began. Something about it chilled him. "Hawk, you seeing this?" a wingman radioed. "Yeah," Ellison replied softly. "Looks like they've been hiding more than we thought." But he didn't have time to think. Another wave of Hellcats streaked past overhead. More bombs fell. More ships died. Operation Hailstone had only been underway for 20 minutes, and the greatest fortress in the Pacific was burning like kindling. This was not just a raid, it was an execution. And somewhere below, in the lagoon's depths, secrets were sinking fast, along with the ships that carried them. February 16, 1944. Truk Lagoon, Caroline Islands, 10:26 hours. The lagoon burned like a floating graveyard as Lieutenant Commander James Hawk Ellison banked his Dauntless through a column of oily black smoke rising from the ruins of the Ikoku Maru. 4 hours of relentless attacks had turned Japan's secret naval fortress into a cauldron of molten steel, sinking ships and panicked sailors thrashing in flaming water. Smoke smeared across the sky in dark, choking layers. The air tasted of cordite, oil, and burning paint. Anti-aircraft shells burst blindly, no longer coordinated, just panicked blasts from crews firing through fumes and chaos. "Hawk, this is Falcon Lead. Enemy airfields neutralized. We're mopping up stragglers," Ellison heard through the radio, the voice distorted by static. "Copy," he replied, his throat raw. "Any Zero resistance?" "Minimal. They hardly got wheels off the ground." Below, the lagoon looked like a shattered mirror, reflecting fire instead of sunlight. Destroyers churned desperately, trying to flee through the North Pass, only to be caught in perfect torpedo patterns dropped by Avengers. One destroyer flipped completely, lifting out of the water before crashing back in, spine broken. A submarine chaser burst into flame as Hellcats strafed it from bow to stern. Yet not everything here was chaos. Some things were still, eerily still. Toward the center of the lagoon, a large shadow remained unmoving beneath the waves. Ellison had seen it during his dive. Now sunlight pierced the smoke just enough for him to see it again, the unmistakable hull of a large vessel sitting quietly on the seabed. "Drake 2, you seeing that?" Ellison radioed. "Southwest quadrant." "Affirmative," Drake 2 replied. "Looks like a whale down there." "That's no whale," Ellison murmured. "That's a transport, or something bigger." He had a feeling, uneasy, persistent, that this wreck had been here long before the attack started, and that the Japanese had wanted it hidden. He didn't get long to think about it. "Hawk, we've got movement! Enemy ships breaking for it in passage!" Falcon Lead called. Ellison turned sharply. Sure enough, 2 cruisers and a destroyer were attempting to flee through the narrow southern channel. One of the cruisers, Agano class, was already firing wildly at incoming American aircraft, its gunners coughing through smoke. "All birds, new heading! Cut off those ships!" His Dauntless roared forward. Other dive bombers and Avengers converged on his position, sunlight glinting off their wings. They formed a loose strike group and descended. The Japanese ships zigzagged at full speed, wakes carving frantic patterns through the lagoon. Flak blossomed upward in clusters. "Targets acquired," Ellison announced. He dove. The world shrank to the edge of his gun sight. The cruiser grew larger, details sharpening, sailors scrambling, water foaming around the bow, officers shouting orders. "Steady, steady." Ellison released his bomb. A heartbeat later, it struck just aft of the forward turret. The explosion ripped open the deck, a geyser of steel and flame erupting skyward. Another Dauntless hit the destroyer's stern, blasting the depth charge racks. A chain reaction explosion tore the ship apart as the charges cooked off. Flames raced down its length. The entire stern folded like wet cardboard before the bow slid under, taking dozens of men with it. The second cruiser tried to turn, but an Avengers torpedo struck dead center. The explosion lifted the ship out of the water. For a moment, the cruiser hung there as if suspended, then split almost neatly in half. The lagoon swallowed both pieces. "All southern escapees neutralized," Falcon Lead called. "We own this place." Ellison circled back for altitude and surveyed the entire battlefield. Wreckage littered the lagoon, burning ships, overturned barges, drifting oil slicks. Fire clung to the water in long streaks, fed by ruptured fuel tanks. The devastation was worse than Pearl Harbor, far worse. This time, the Japanese had been caught mid-movement, mid-assembly, mid-sleep. Entire airfields had been cratered before planes could lift off. Fuel dumps evaporated in expanding fireballs. One seaplane tender was still sinking, its mast slowly tilting, as if bowing to the inevitable. But amidst all the destruction, Ellison noticed something strange. The water around the sunken transport, the large shape beneath the central lagoon, remained calm. No flames drifted near it, no debris, no sailors, nothing. It was as if the wreck sat at the eye of the storm, untouched, deliberate. "This is Hawk. I request recon pass over central wreck. There's something off about it." The response came quickly. "Negative. Priority targets remain in the north anchorage. Hit the ammo barges." Ellison clenched his jaw. Orders were orders. He turned his aircraft north. But he kept glancing at that shadow beneath the lagoon. Its outline too clean, its presence too intentional. Whatever it was, it hadn't been sunk today. And the Japanese had ringed the area with mines and guard boats, far more than any ordinary transport warranted. The mystery burned in the back of his mind, unresolved. He pushed the throttle and joined the strike on the last surviving ships. An ammunition barge erupted in a towering blast that punched through the clouds like a volcano eruption. Shock waves rattled Ellison's canopy and his teeth. The lagoon roared like a living creature as munitions continued to detonate across the base. 5 cruisers, 4 destroyers, dozens of auxiliary ships, hundreds of aircraft, and still the attack went on. By midday, Truk Lagoon had become a sunken graveyard, a graveyard holding secrets, one of them lying silent beneath the waves, waiting for someone to ask the right question. But Ellison wasn't done yet. Neither was Operation Hailstone. The final strikes were still ahead, and the truth about the shadow below the lagoon had yet to surface. February 17, 1944. Truk Lagoon, Caroline Islands, 1552 hours. The smoke that had suffocated Truk Lagoon for nearly 2 days finally began to thin into ragged gray sheets drifting across the water as the sun dipped low over the western horizon. From above, the lagoon resembled a shattered map, broken hulls jutting from the surf, oil slicks swirling like black storm clouds on the surface, fires still burning inside twisted steel wrecks that hissed as seawater swallowed them inch by inch. Operation Hailstone had shattered Japan's strongest Pacific bastion, but as Lieutenant Commander James Hawk Ellison circled in his SBD Dauntless, he couldn't shake the feeling that the job wasn't done. Not yet. His eyes kept returning to a single spot in the lagoon, an unnaturally calm patch of water where sunlight glimmered like metal. Beneath that glassy surface lay a massive shadow, a vessel that hadn't surfaced, exploded, or burned like the others. It lay still, too still. "Hawk, this is Falcon Lead. Final strike waves are returning. Fuel check and come home," the radio crackled. But Ellison banked again, ignoring the order for a moment as he stared down at the dark hull below. The ship's outline was too perfect, too intact for a vessel supposedly caught by surprise. Its bow was sharp, its superstructure recognizable, and its deck, visible in pieces through the water, held something that made his stomach tighten. Crates, barrels, aircraft parts, torpedo casings, all organized, not scattered. And at the bow, two long objects he'd never seen before. Slim cylinders mounted like oversized torpedoes, but shaped wrong, unfamiliar, almost experimental. Japan had buried something here, something important. "Lead, I'm making one more pass," Ellison radioed. "Recon only." "Negative, Hawk. Fuel is low. Return at once." "One pass," he repeated. "Then I'm coming home." Silence. Then a resigned, "One pass. Make it quick." Ellison dropped altitude, engine humming low as he skimmed over the calm patch of water. The stillness around the wreck was unnatural, like the eye of a storm. Every ship around it burned or sank violently, yet this one sat untouched, as if the Japanese had scuttled it before the attack to hide whatever it carried. He leaned closer to the canopy, trying to identify the strange cylinders. Missiles? Fuel tanks? Some kind of new weapon? Then the radio exploded with static. "Hawk, brake! Brake now!" Ellison jerked upward as a silver streak roared past his wingtip, a Zero, the only one he'd seen all afternoon, diving out of a lingering column of smoke like a ghost resurrected from the dying fortress. Its 20mm cannons spat green tracers that ripped through the air where Ellison's Dauntless had been seconds earlier. "Falcon Lead, I've got an active bogey over Central Lagoon," he shouted. "Hawk, disengage, get clear." Ellison rolled hard left, dropping to barely 600 feet, salt spray misting across his canopy as he skimmed the water. The Zero followed, engine screaming, its shadow racing him across the lagoon. He weaved between the rising pillars of smoke, using the burning wrecks for cover, but the Zero stayed glued to his tail. Come on," Ellison muttered, coaxing the Dauntless to climb just enough to clear the bow of a capsized freighter. The Zero fired again, rounds punching holes through the wing root. Warning lights blinked red across the control panel. He felt the plane shudder, weak, wounded, but still alive. He leveled out, pulled hard right, pulling the Dauntless into a brutal vertical climb that strained its aging frame. The Zero followed, but too aggressively. The Japanese pilot misjudged the angle, clipped the lingering thermals from a burning oil slick, and stalled for half a second. It was all Ellison needed. He slid down behind the Zero's tail, squeezed the trigger, and fired a long burst. Tracers stitched across the Zero's fuselage. The engine burst into flame. The fighter spiraled downward and smashed into the lagoon in a spray of fire and steam. The radio went silent. Ellison pulled away, panting, hands shaking. He looked down once more at the calm water where the mysterious wreck sat undisturbed, its secrets sinking deeper into the blue. What had the Japanese hidden there? Why protect it until the end? Why sink it before the Americans arrived? Those answers would be swallowed by the lagoon for decades. "Hawk, report!" Falcon Lead barked. Ellison steadied his breathing. "Bogey down," he replied, returning to base. As he climbed into the reddening sky, he looked back at the lagoon one last time. Truk burned, ships died, the fortress was gone, but that patch of still water remained untouched, silent, secretive, unbroken. Operation Hailstone had destroyed Japan's Pearl Harbor, but beneath the waves, something else survived, something Ellison knew the world would not discover until long after the war was over.